Welcome to Horizons of Thought. Today I want you to imagine that you're a politician in charge of a very large country. I'm going to present to you a lot of different opinions on border and border policy. And imagine that you're trying to decide what kind of policies you want to set in your country. How would you go about it? Well, let's begin with the organization known as illegal. They make the argument that there's just no such thing as illegal immigration. And the concept of laws in this category is itself wrong, that everybody has the right to asylum and everybody has the right to travel freely. This organization hearkens to lines in the Old Testament that we should greet and be kind to the alien and the stranger. And it has a very strong pedigree across multiple groups and multiple belief systems. However, there are many people who believe in border controls of various kinds. Ancient China had border controls preventing people from leaving the country without getting a visa. This is mentioned in the book Journey to the West, and you can hear about it all throughout history. This particular policy was enacted in order to control where the Chinese population went, to make sure that it wasn't influenced too much by outside sources and to make sure that the population levels stayed very high inside of China. There are also rules that exist in many countries against preventing economic refugees from coming in. The idea that you don't want to have a lot of very, very poor workers come into your country that make it harder for the poor in your own country to work. And this might seem odd. Sometimes it's couched in various racist terms. But I want you to imagine what it's like to have the kind of job that you can't move away from your hometown. You have to stay where you grew up or where you live now because it's very difficult for you to get a job elsewhere. Sometimes that's teachers where changing jurisdictions is difficult. Sometimes that can be doctors where changing jurisdictions is difficult. But quite often it's a person who repairs roads or handles telephone lines or handles something local in their area that's necessary for everybody to survive, but it makes it very difficult for that person to move away. Sometimes they're just so poor that they can't afford to pick up and move away very easily. These people, when immigrants come in who are also poor, can find their jobs at risk and find it very difficult to survive because they've already been on the edge to begin with. Another kind of reason that we make border controls in our world is to prevent certain people groups from arriving or to deal with various cultural conflicts. These have at times in history been very racist rules, but I want you to also think about why they might exist apart from racism. There are people in the world who do not believe in freedom of religion. They believe that if you are a member of a religion and you change to another religion, that you should be executed for that, that that's a crime. It's called apostasy. There are people in the world who believe that homosexuals should not be allowed to marry, and they're not just opposed to it in some vague moral sense. They believe that people should be punished or even executed for that, that it is a crime to do so. There are people in the world who believe that you should not have freedom of speech on many topics, and they can conflict and have trouble getting along in societies where people believe that freedom of speech should allow them to be offensive or to make fun of various religious beliefs and various treasured cultural customs. So you've got to think about that. If you are this politician in charge of the country, how are you going to deal with immigration in that scenario? More basic note, when people come into your country, what if they don't speak your language? What kind of rules are you going to have to make sure that they're able to speak the language in the main society so that they're able to trade with everybody and have the maximum opportunity economically? What are you going to do if you run into a group of people who have very different cultural views on how you trade and how you lend things? One person might believe if they lend a lawnmower to another that they can expect that lawnmower back in really good condition and well maintained. Another person might believe that if their neighbor lends them a lawnmower, it's time to start a lawn mowing business, and it doesn't matter if they return that lawnmower intact. This kind of thing happens in the real world all the time. One of the solutions to dealing with that is to have people get to know each other long enough and talk to each other long enough so that they can come up with a shared understanding of how they should treat each other in trade, commerce, borrowing, and neighborly relations. This is a lot easier when people come in slowly into a country than it is if they come in quickly into a country. But in this day and age, I think one of the most important things you've got to think about on this front is the preventing of the spread of diseases. Right now, we are living with the virus that shall not be named. This particular virus is spread all over the world. It is now a pandemic, and countries have been responding first by preventing those travelers from countries that have been hit hardest from coming into their country, or causing them to quarantine for 14 days if they happen to be residents of the country they're coming back to. And now we're in a world where flying has been restricted pretty much to essential personnel only in many countries in the world. And I myself here in New Zealand am locked down, as is everybody else in the country, unable to travel about for the next 4 weeks. We're going to be staying in our homes, leaving only to do grocery shopping with one family member doing the grocery shopping, or in the case of severe emergencies. We're not meant even to go on drives by ourselves to hiking trails that are out and far away from people. If we're going to walk around outside on our own, we're meant to do it in our neighborhoods. This is all to say that when you think of all of these rules and all of these different ways of dealing with border controls, you can understand very quickly that the kinds of policies you're going to want to have are going to change with the times. When this pandemic has calmed down and it has spread throughout the world, or economic situation has gotten so bad that we can no longer lock down our countries, we're going to find that the policies that we're enacting now with incredibly strict border patrols simply will not and cannot work. In times without a pandemic running around, I think nobody would want border patrols and policies as strict as this. Nobody wants to be locked in their house for a month. It's not fun. The other side of it is, it's very uncommon to find people who would like to have completely free migration of people at all times. It's easy to imagine how difficult it can be to allow migration of people everywhere and anywhere they want. It can disrupt local populations and make it very difficult for people to get along. This even in the face of incredible refugee crises that we're seeing in the world today. It's difficult no matter who you are. If you're a poor refugee fleeing from Syria and you've been dealing with horrific war for many years, you just want food, you just want water, and you want an opportunity to get a life back, shelter, just to be treated decently. But if you're on the borders of Europe, in Hungary or in Greece, you might be completely terrified of the sheer number of people dealing with a large European body that isn't letting populations spread as easily as you might hope. So it becomes very difficult for you too. You've maybe made yourself an identity as your country, and you could find that there are many more refugees than you even have members of your own country. Nothing, absolutely nothing about borders and border policy is easy. And so I want you to think about everything that you believe about borders and border policy, so that when the time comes that you make political decisions, when the time comes that you do have power on this topic, that you've thought of all the ways in which your particular vision of how border and border policies are could go wrong, how they could harm the country. Too many controls, you may not have an economy at all. You may find yourself very poor. You may find yourself isolated because we live in a world where people do want freedom of motion and people do want trade. Not enough border patrols, and you might find your country overrun by this current Voldemort plague that's afflicting the world. You've got to really think about what your policies would be and not be so afraid to hear points of view that are sometimes difficult or offensive. So with that, I hope that you have a great day despite all of the difficulty that's going on in the world. If you like this channel, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because that gives you notifications. If you wish to support this channel, please look below to the donor box link and subscribe to this channel through donor box. Have a good day.